Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our live Thought Leader webinar series. For those who are new to our webinar series, my name is Julianne Manning, the Customer Care Specialist at Stewardship. Our goal with our Thought Leader webinar series is to provide tools, resources, and hot topics that impact nonprofits and faith communities. We're thrilled you decided to join us today for our September Thought Leader webinar as we explore fall fundraising and how to reach younger donors. Also, for anyone that is joining us live today, you may use the chat feature below to ask questions throughout today's webinar. We will have a time to answer any questions at the end of today's Thought Leader presentation. And for those who are joining us after in the recorded webinar, please feel free to comment below and our team will respond to you directly with any questions you may have. Today, our guest speaker is Matt Golis of Give Game. Matt Golis is the founder and CEO of Give Game, a venture he began last year in Columbus, Ohio, after 20 years of growing startups in Silicon Valley. Matt originally relocated from Ohio to the Bay Area in the mid-1990s. There, he founded rentpayment.com, the original online rent payment service. In 2003, Rent Payment merged with Yapstone, and Matt became CEO. Today, Yapstone is the largest online payments platform for property managers. This month's webinar topic is Fun Fall Fundraisers. And throughout this month, Stewardship has shared tips and tricks of how your organization can make your fundraising fun. We encourage you to take a peek at our latest articles and news on our website, stewardshiptechnology.com. To expand more on this topic, our thought leader, Matt Golis, is going to share how your organization can reach out to younger donors with fun fundraising. So without further ado, welcome Matt Golis. Matt?
Thanks, Julianne. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on our webinar today. I'm super excited to share with you some of our learnings through our experiences with connecting with younger donors and how fun we think is one of the most important parts of that equation to drive giving. So the topic, as we talked about, is how do we reach these younger donors with fun? We're going to be sharing with data from a recent survey that we completed that really talked about some of the characteristics that here in giving and the motivations for giving unique, particularly with this younger set. So one of the things that we think is part and parcel to a very successful online giving experience for younger donors particularly is how do we employ some aspect of gamification to drive their behavior? In particular, how can we drive perpetual giving through gamification? So a lot of people have lots of different points of view about what gamification is. There are certainly companies that use gamification to track how employees are doing when it comes to certain activities internal to the company. There's certain unique ways that people are rewarded through apps, like if you've ever used the Starbucks app and earned Starbucks rewards, or Chipotle with their app. And there's a number of ways that we're finding that consumers are getting driven to the behavior that we want to achieve. And this same exact type of motivation can also apply to nonprofits. And so a couple of the tools that we talk about in how nonprofits can employ gamification to really connect and engage with younger donors is really what we want to share because we think it can be so much more than just doing a traditional ask for money. So why gamification? The internal examples are where gamification can really motivate and engage employees. Again, this is where companies are trying to make sure that employees are staying on top of things and trying to make it fun from a human resources type of point of view. But we also believe that there are tremendous opportunities for gamification externally because in terms of giving, we think that gamification can really be the key to driving more sales, more interaction, and it doesn't have to make the awkwardness of asking for money. It can really be something that's fun, and it's almost like donors forget they're even donating money. They're having so much fun through the experience of engaging through a game experience that just giving is a part of that experience, and it does take away some of that awkwardness of asking for money. So, what are some aspects of gamification that have existed from a historical perspective in the nonprofit world? Some people view gamification from the standpoint of, well, we may do a 50-50 raffle. And it's kind of fun because we encourage people to give as much as they can, because the more money they give, the more chance they have a chance of winning more money. Certainly, there's lots of gamification around golf outings. It's not just obviously selling tickets for people to participate, but it can be things like, how can we create games around longest drive, closest to the pin, other things that we may tie into some aspect of, let's say, an auction event at a golf outing. And then probably the third most popular one is, how can we make auction dinners and galas more engaging through gamification, so that we're really encouraging people to really participate, have fun while they're at the event, so that they really think about how they want to continue to support that cause in the future. But one thing that we find that's in common to all of these types of activities is they do take a lot of time, effort, and people power. And for various types of nonprofits, particularly talking about schools, youth sports organizations, and so forth, we do find that one factor that is weighed into these decisions is, what is the amount of volunteer effort that it's actually going to take to pull off this event, or in this case, incorporating gamification into the event. And one of the things that we're really cognizant about is, how can we do something that can be online in a way that doesn't require a lot of people power, a lot of time and effort, and really doesn't have to involve, for instance, selling something or doing something where it is going to involve incorporating sponsors, getting items, for instance, to offer it to the group attending the event. And how can we do this in a very, very, very low people involvement way that makes it super easy for nonprofits to raise money? So what we think is, there's new and exciting ways that nonprofits can embrace gamification, and it doesn't need to involve sort of these historical methods. So, what does Give Game do, and how do we kind of approach this this aspect of how gamification can help nonprofits connect with younger donors? So, what Give Game uniquely does is, we look at ways that we can turn major live events, both sports and what we broadly call pop culture, into opportunities for nonprofits to actually raise money tied to those events. So it's all of the major sporting events, from weeks of the NFL or the college football season, to Major League Baseball, to the Stanley Cup Finals, to the Kentucky Derby, to golf and tennis championships, as much as it is Hollywood award shows like the Oscars, the Grammys, the VMAs, the Country Music Awards, as much as it's reality TV shows, which happen to be probably some of our most popular games, because for a variety of reasons, people have watch parties tied to The Bachelor, Bachelorette, Big Brother, Dancing with the Stars, and so forth. We also see opportunities in the e-gaming space, because there are a number of these new esports tournaments. And in those cases, there are a number of participants in those particular tournaments, both teams and esports players, who are very active on different streaming services like Twitch and YouTube. And in many cases, they actually are very philanthropically minded. Many times they're leveraging the audience that's watching them play their game to actually raise money for causes. And so we view those tournaments as just another opportunity that gets a lot of attention for nonprofits to use those tournaments to raise money. But I would say, far and away, the most popular games and events that we've leveraged have certainly been the reality TV shows and the major sporting events. So what are we really talking about leveraging those events? Well, what we're doing is, we create a gameplay experience around making selections or picks about which people that are participating in that event that we believe are going to perform well. So as a donor, they would be clicking on a fundraiser link. It would have them make these picks. As you can see, in each game, we have a scoring system. So in the case of The Bachelorette, you're looking at here, you can see we have actions like, when one of these contestants receives a rose, gets in the fantasy suite. If they are crying or swearing, they get -1. We try to make it as fun as we can. And then the aspect of a leaderboard where each of the donors who's made those picks, when the actual event begins, is going to see how their picks do while the actual episode is going on, or let's say in the case of a golf tournament, from let's say Thursday when the golf tournament begins until the final on Sunday. So it's just a fun way to be able to track how these picks do perform in the actual event. So most nonprofits will share this link on social media, typically 5 to 7 days before the actual event. And then once the event begins, then they're watching that leaderboard that you see on the right to see how their picks do until the final. And again, it's not something where this has to have a prize like a 50-50 raffle or some other aspect of enriching a winner. We're finding that donors are more than happy to play and donate. So when they make these picks, they immediately make a donation. And then they're watching the leaderboard when the event's going on, just from a bragging rights perspective. It's just a more fun way to make a donation. And we're trying to encourage that behavior because we think that if donors have fun playing this game, and obviously there's many different events that people enjoy. So these are the types of activities. Gamification can drive perpetual giving because what's fun for them in playing the game when there's a donation tied to playing really can drive that better engagement, that more perpetual relationship with the donor over time. Another example of how we can use gamification is in rewarding the player from the standpoint of virtual trophies, earning XP points, badging, achievements, and the like. This is another thing that we're going to talk about. You'll see in some of our data from our recent survey that shows how much the younger generation really is motivated, needs something more than just obviously making a donation with a credit card. So here's an example of where we're awarding effectively achievements or trophies to donors when they make their first donation, the first time they play, potentially if they've played for multiple causes. And also, if you've ever played other mobile games where maybe you earn certain achievements and then you can also see there are certain achievements that are still locked that you have yet to receive, that's another thing where it's kind of, creating gamification around working something for donors to strive towards achieving. So, they see the things that they still need to unlock, and human behavior is such that people want to do what they need to do to unlock those additional achievements. So it's definitely playing to a lot of that human behavior that you'll find with mobile gaming, generally speaking, but just applying it to more of a nonprofit application. So the next part of our webinar, we want to go through and talk about, here's some of the data that we're finding in terms of the difference in behavior between what we consider gamers and non-gamers. So people who have either played a fantasy sports type experience or are very active in mobile gaming. And then also looking at some of the motivations around the younger demographic and what are really their motivations for giving. So this first chart, and this is just, again, a snippet of this study that we did. As you can see, over 700 participants. This was actually a study that was put on by a sports management professor at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. He's done quite a bit of research around fantasy gaming and motivation, and actually was able to put together this group to understand, again, these differences in the style of play and the characteristics of both gamers and non-gamers. So as I mentioned, gamers by definition for the study were people that have either played in a fantasy game or some other bracket style competition like March Madness. So you can see here the mix. There's also a number of stereotypes that many people have about fantasy sports that, for instance, is very male dominated, very female. Not as many women play. But as you can see, in fact, there is quite a balance in many cases between the gender as well as the age. I think is probably older than many people would perceive in that gamer demographic. Looking at the next set of data, we talk about the motives for giving. And so as you might expect, doing a good deed, doing something good is still the number one motivation that we found in the study. But there are other things that play into their decision for giving. So there is a desire for social responsibility. We certainly find that more common with younger donors. The aspect of social interaction. So sometimes becoming more sociable through giving or being a part of a nonprofit can certainly be a motivation. And as we see in the next slide here, you're going to see the difference between what are the drivers and motivation with gamers and non-gamers, and then you'll see in the next one the difference for the age demographic. So you can see with gamers, certainly common with most donors, altruism is certainly the number one factor. There are 3 questions that went into that one. Next one being they want to do a good deed. And then going on down the line, mass psychology, desire to improve charity, desire for the common good, social responsibility, social interaction. But the one thing that I really want to point out in this particular slide is the showing off, reward expecting manner that is characteristic to gamers. So as you might imagine, if they are a gamer, they're obviously striving to win in whatever game they may play, you know, whether that be Candy Crush or whether that's fantasy football. And so from that perspective, they really enjoy this aspect of working towards achieving something for themselves as opposed to just providing some benefit to the nonprofit that they're supporting. So it just tells you how that is a factor that goes into their decision around online giving. How can I achieve some achievement or reward as part of giving to a cause? As we look at the next slide, you'll see here the breakdown between the 18 to 34-year-old demographic in the study and the 35 and older. One of the things also I wanted to point out here, similar to the pretty even split between gamers and non-gamers, also notice that there's a really nice balance in this particular study between the 18 to 34-year-old and the 35 and older demographic. So once again, it is not really skewed heavily within one demographic group. It's a pretty good balance between the two. But you'll find, as we found in this data, that the younger audience does share that same sentiment as the gamers. They care more about what they get out of giving rather than just naturally wanting to support a nonprofit. So again, this is where our conclusions are that it needs to be something more than just motivating donors to give. And in fact, one of the other aspects that we're trying to change behaviorally is this mentality of when I give, it's an event. It's a once a year, once, you know, let's say a semester or however often type activity for younger donors. And we think that with gamification, you now have an opportunity for multiple touch points where maybe those donors are in fact giving less each time they give, but you're now giving them a reason to give multiple times. And as we all know, the more touch points that you have with donors, even if it's for a lesser dollar amount each time, the more you're going to build that relationship over time and getting them almost conditioned to, you know, potentially giving 3, 4, 5, 10 times rather than that kind of annual mentality. So just a couple things that we want to talk about beyond gaming and just things that you should be mindful of when it talks about connecting with younger donors and kind of making giving fun, just generally speaking. So the first thing that we want to talk about, and many of you are most likely already doing this, but you know, there's a lot of ways that you can make even participating or being a part of one of your events fun. You know, offering goodies and swag to volunteers is really a great way. It not only makes people feel connected to your cause and makes them feel like, hey, I'm getting something for participating or volunteering for this event, but you have to remember that, you know, whenever they're wearing that swag or carrying your bag, whenever they're away from that event, it's an opportunity to advertise your cause and also gives them some pride from the standpoint of this is a cause that I support. This is something I want to show off how I'm aligned with this organization. Another thing, though, that we have found is a great way to connect with younger donors and followers in social media is to do things like random giveaways. So you can do things where you can say, hey, we're going to randomly select one of our followers by virtue of following us on social media or retweeting a message or something like that, where you're asking them to do some type of action or responding to an email in such a way that you're offering an incentive, something to get them to connect or engage with you. So another very simple thing, doesn't cost nonprofits much money to do things like this, but it's an opportunity to talk about something on social media and have a way for them to connect with you. Some other examples of interacting with them on social media. Obviously, anything that you do is an opportunity to organically grow your brand. You know, the aspect of how frequently you're making posts on social media certainly comes into play there. We also think that given that this is the way that younger donors want to interact with the causes that they care about, we want to have posts that when they read it, we want it to be easy for them to share those posts on social media. Because again, that's the way they interact with their friends. That's the way they interact with other brands, certainly in the traditional for-profit world. So this is just another thing that nonprofits ought to be doing to really connect with these donors in a way that's different than just doing email campaigns and newsletters. The other thing that I think a lot of people sometimes forget about is how incredibly critical it still is to say thank you to donors. Whether it's a follow up immediately after making a donation, there's certainly some nonprofits that are still sending out certainly gratitude letters or some aspect of a thank you by mail. But remember, with this younger donor demographic, they want to know about the impact that their gift has made. They want to know immediately that you appreciate and have gratitude associated with their contribution. Because remember, those touch points and showing grace around the fact that they made that donation to your cause can lead to increased generosity. So just be mindful that that's always something that's never going to go away. It's always important to show gratitude, to actually say thank you to younger donors, so that they don't feel like, okay, I'm just making a donation online and I'm never heard from again. So to achieve a lot of these things, and I think a lot of it comes back to one of the first points we made, which was how gamification can really drive perpetual giving, is how can we use these game elements as motivators to really drive the behavior that we want from our younger donors? How can we use gamification to keep users engaged and coming back, wanting to see more about the good work we're doing, other things unrelated to fundraising? Maybe it's just talking about the impact that the money raised has made for the cause to this point. And then the other great thing about gamification, we think, is it actually encourages smaller ticket donors, and therefore with a game that's unique and different every time, you can actually get more donations from a single donor than you would otherwise. And that's another thing to also think about, is you think about these cases where if a donor feels that, hey, unless I can give a certain dollar amount, let's say that's $50 or $100, those people may not be giving at all. But if you told them, oh, I could play a game or have some way of interacting with you where I could play 4 or 5 times for, let's say, $10 to $25, now you've gotten not just the fact that maybe over time they've actually given you close to $100, but you've now had 4 touch points of them actually supporting your cause, rather than maybe not even getting the first donation because they thought that at the level that they wanted to give, maybe $10 or $25, it wasn't going to have an impact, so they didn't do it at all. So there's a lot of benefit because of the multiple touch points in getting multiple smaller ticket donations rather than being so dependent upon donors giving at a certain level. The other thing, of course, is that it's just about accessibility. If it appears that every dollar matters, and you want to show how no matter what the amount is, it's going to have an impact. It also, I think, is going to resonate much more with younger donors, knowing that they're obviously going to have a smaller giving budget than an older demographic. So with that, that concludes the presentation about how we can make giving fun and engaging with younger donors through gamification. So we'd love to open up it to the questions.
Yes, perfect. So thank you, Matt. Thank you for sharing your expertise today about fundraising and gamification. Yes, for everyone who is joining us live today, if you do have questions, we'll give you just a moment. You can enter those into the chat feature there. So feel free to use that chat feature and we can respond to you. If a question were to come to you after the webinar today, feel free to reach out to Matt or myself and we'll make sure to get an answer to you. And as we're waiting for those questions again, we just wanted to say thank you to Matt for providing us with a lot of great resources to utilize. If you are interested in connecting with Matt for additional information from today's webinar, please feel free to contact Matt. And you can see his contact information on the screen, or of course, go to givegame.com. Again, feel free to ask any questions after our webinar today. We do thank you all for joining us. A copy of today's webinar will be emailed to you, so you will have it as a resource. You can also explore other resources and tools on our Facebook or LinkedIn social channels and on our website at stewardshiptechnology.com. There you can also find future webinars, products and services, as well as trends and hot topics for nonprofits and faith communities. So We're not seeing any questions today, so we're just going to go ahead and close. And thank you again. Thank you, Matt, for presenting, and thank you all for joining us today. Have a wonderful day.